Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here today. I'm House Democratic Leader Tim Greimel, and I'd like to thank State Representative Jeremy Moss for his leadership and for being here today to talk about a very important issue, and that is the need to extend the Freedom of Information Act to apply to the legislature and to the governor. When it comes to transparency and accountability, our state government has a major problem that needs to be fixed if we want to restore public trust in government. Michigan is one of only 2 states that allow its legislature and governor's office to be exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. Over the last several weeks, we have seen once again the problems that come when government makes decisions in a shroud of secrecy with little oversight or accountability to the public that government is supposed to serve. The latest example came during the Courser Gamrat situation, when Speaker Cotter released his, quote, investigative, end quote, report. The way this report was released sparked renewed controversy because it was put together in a shroud of secrecy and was, quote, sanitized, end quote, that's the Speaker's office word, sanitized, before it was available to the public. The sanitized report failed to answer questions about the Speaker's office's potential involvement in a cover-up, including the Speaker office's meeting with whistleblowing staff and that staff's subsequent termination. But more than that, it demonstrated once again that when government acts in secret, it damages the public trust and prevents public accountability and government accountability. We were not the only ones to demand more transparency and accountability in this situation. Major newspapers, including the Detroit News, the Detroit Free Press, MLive, and the Port Huron Times-Herald, among many others, all did the same. But it shouldn't take huge amounts of public pressure, and it shouldn't take every major newspaper in the state to demand that government act with transparency and openness. It should be the way business is always conducted. Secrecy cannot continue to be business as usual in the state legislature and the governor's office. That's why we, House Democrats, are calling for passage this week of legislation that would apply the Freedom of Information Act to the legislature and to the governor's office. This crucial law is the public's primary tool in ensuring that their government acts in their best interest. And now I would like to turn it over to State Representative Jeremy Moss to explain in greater detail the reasons this legislation is needed. Jeremy?
Thank you very much. Thanks, Leader Greimel, for your passion on this issue. I'm State Representative Jeremy Moss from Southfield, and I'm a former Southfield City Councilman and currently the Minority Vice Chair of the House Local Government Committee, and I'm acutely aware of FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, that law and its importance to the public. My very first city council meeting when I was elected in 2011, a gentleman came to complain to the Southfield City Council during public comment because city staff was giving him a hard time about getting him documents from the Planning Commission that he requested about a development that was going on in his neighborhood. He requested those documents under the FOIA law that Southfield City Hall is bound to respect. Ultimately, the city complied under the direction from the city council, but he was so agitated that from that meeting forward, he came to every city council meeting as a self-appointed city government watchdog. That was 4 years ago, and he's attended every city council meeting since. When we agitate our constituents by not being transparent, by not being accessible, we look like we have something to hide even if we don't. And if local municipalities and counties must comply with FOIA laws, then the state legislature and the governor's office should as well. I wish I could say that this Courser Gamrat situation was an isolated example of why we need a more powerful Freedom of Information Act, but it is not. And we actually introduced this legislation back in March because of issues that have arisen in the past here. Earlier this year, we saw another example of government operating in the shadows and using smoke and mirrors to approve of the spending $134 million on new state Senate offices. So is it any wonder that the public feels that their government operates with a level of deception and dishonesty when $134 million can be spent on new offices for legislators, but money can't be found for roads or for schools? But there it is. $134 million for brand new offices, and really no paper trail to explain it. So how can the average person make sense of that? The conclusion that the average individual makes is that their state government acts with a level of deception and dishonesty and effectively shuts their voice out. And we also remember the now infamous Nerd Fund and its secret donors in connection to state government. Another example, the day after the settlement for the Enbridge pipeline spill of 2010 was announced, the House Oversight and Ethics Committee began taking testimony on House Bill 4540. This bill exempts information held by oil and petroleum and other energy infrastructure companies from FOIA requests. The timing of this is extremely suspicious, and there have been reports from the media that state industry groups were closely involved in developing this piece of legislation. And there are also cases where FOIA has done its job. We remember the scandal that was unearthed at MISHTA, in which the director, Scott Woosley, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, public dollars, on lavish hotels and first-class flights around the world with gourmet meals, etc. Because this was brought to public light, Woosley was rightfully forced to resign from his position. And we remember Aramark, the now disgraced former state contractor. But how many more examples are there that will never come to light because the legislature and the governor's office are not subjected to FOIA? My background and my degree is in journalism, and while the three branches of government provide a check and balance to one another, it's the ability of journalists and civic groups and average citizens to use FOIA to provide a check and balance to the whole process. FOIA acts as a disinfectant on corruption and gives everyday people the power to spotlight questionable practices and wrongdoing. And it's long past time that we subject the state legislature and the governor's office to FOIA to prevent these things from happening in the future. 48 other states already make their state legislatures and governors operate in the light of day, and Michigan should too. There is no reason why Michigan should operate in a shroud of secrecy when it comes to the public's right to know how their government makes decisions. So today, we are calling on our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to pass this law now. Pass it this week. There is no reason to delay. 48 other states do it, and we can end the secrecy here in Michigan as well.